8 of Isaiah. Then the Lord said to me, take for yourself a large tablet and write on it in ordinary letters, swift as the booty, speedy as the prey. And I will take to myself faithful witnesses from testimony, Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Jeberechiah. So I approached the prophetess, and she conceived and gave birth to a son. Then the Lord said to me, name him Maher-shalal-hash-baz, for before the boy, the boy knows how to cry out, my father or my mother, the wealth of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria will be carried away before the king of Assyria. I send it against a godless nation and commission it. Oh, I done turned too many pages. I'm sorry. I knew that didn't sound right. Again, the Lord spoke to me further, saying, inasmuch as these people have rejected the gently flowing waters of Shiloh and rejoice in Rezin and the son of Remaliah, now therefore, behold, the Lord is about to bring on them the strong and abundant waters of the Euphrates, even the king of Assyria and all his glory. And it will rise up over all its channels and go over all its banks. Then it will sweep on into Judah. It will overflow and pass through. It will reach even to the neck, and the spread of its wings will fill the breadth of your land, O Emmanuel. Be broken, O peoples, and be shattered, and give ear, all remote places of the earth. Gird yourselves, yet be shattered. Gird yourselves, yet be shattered. Devise a plan, but it will be thwarted. State a proposal, but it will not stand, for God is with us. For so the Lord spoke to me with mighty power and instructed me not to walk in the way of this people, saying, you are not to say it is a conspiracy in regard to all that this people call a conspiracy, and you are not to fear what they fear or be in dread of it. It is the Lord of hosts whom you should regard as holy, and he shall be your fear, and he shall be your dread. Then he shall become a sanctuary, but to both the houses of Israel a stone to strike and a rock to stumble over, and a snare and a trap for the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Many will stumble over them, then they will fall and be broken. They will even be snared and caught. Bind up the testimony, seal the law among my disciples, and I will wait for the Lord who is hiding his face from the house of Jacob. I will even look eagerly for him. Behold, I and the children whom the Lord has given me are for signs and wonders in Israel from the Lord of hosts who dwells on Mount Zion. When they say to you, consult the mediums and the spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people consult their God? Should they consult the dead on behalf of the living? To the law and to the testimony, if they do not speak according to this world, it is because they have no dawn. They will pass through the land hard-pressed and famished, and it will turn out that when they are hungry, they will be enraged and curse their king and their God as they face upward. Then they will look to the earth and behold distress and darkness, the gloom of anguish, and they will be driven away into the darkness. Sound like a hoo-ha, doesn't it? Y'all ready for the party? So let's get into this thing, and basically I just put in my notes commentary thoughts, because this chapter is a little bit confusing. And part of the reason is the last chapter, the Lord said to Ahaz, ask me a sign and I'll give it. And we've heard all our lives that this is the sign of Jesus coming. But we've also, if you've studied Isaiah or listened to any sermons that are exegetical about it, you would know that what God asked in chapter 7 was immediate, was then, and also future. So the immediate is this Maher-shalal-hash-baz. I can say it 3 more times if y'all want me to. He's not the Emmanuel. He's not. But he is the symbol or a remembrance of it, and the reason is because he's going to see the destruction. Now you think about when Jesus comes, or came actually, he came as a baby, he grew up, and he saw destruction, and he saw death, right? The difference between Maharshala Hashbaz, I'll say it one more time before it's over, and Jesus is that he saw the destruction, but he didn't see the redemption because Jesus is the redemption. Now, it's not that he didn't see Israel come out of this calamity, but he didn't see the true redemption like Jesus. But when you look at these verses, what you find here is that in chapter 8, the Lord is giving this description to Isaiah of what's going to happen. Swift is the booty, speedy is the prey. In other words, they're coming for you, and they're coming quickly for you, and they're going to take everything they want, and you're not going to be able to stop them. Now you say, well, why is all of that? And we're going to skip way over here to where he's talking about them consulting the mediums in verse 19. Can you see where Israel's heart was? They were consulting the mediums and the dead and the spirits, and they weren't searching for their God. And he even says, should not a people consult their God? Why are you seeking the dead? Which, by the way, this ought to be an eye-opener to anybody who is looking into the spirit world. Why are you seeking the dead for what's going to happen to the living? Why are you doing that? That doesn't even make good sense. But it does tell you Israel's heart. It does tell you that chapters 1 through 4, at least, were as bad as we thought they were. Because they had gotten to that place where they weren't even seeking after God's guidance. They were seeking after these mediums and these spirits. Partially, I believe, because they understood and knew that there was this division between them and their God because they had abandoned him. They had turned away from him. So when we look at these verses, what we see first and foremost is that God gives Isaiah this vision, this understanding of what's fixing to happen. And he says, you write this down in your big pad with your big pencil. Swift is the booty, speedy is the prey. You leave that and you keep that, because when this is all done, you go back and you read that to Israel. And you remind them what happens to us when we abandon our God and when we choose that the world and the worldly people are more important than him. And then you look at the second thing here, and it is about these waters, right? These swift and smooth waters. In verse 6, he says, and as much as those people have rejected the gentle flowing waters of Shiloh. Now, he is talking about waters, but he's actually using it as a metaphor to, you have rejected me, and so now you don't get the gentle waters of Shiloh. No, what do you get? You get the swift waters of the Euphrates. Now, it's not actually waters that's going to get them. It's the people that's going to get them. They're not going to drown in the waters. They're going to drown in their decisions, and they're going to be taken over. Even the king of Assyria and all his glory, and it will rise up over all its channels and go over all its banks. There's nobody going to help you. There's nobody going to stop it. It's coming for you, and it can't be stopped. Think about that. When the tribulation comes, and many of us think we're ready for it, I'm not sure we are, but we think we are. But when it comes, there's nothing stopping it. And no matter how much you scream, and no matter how much you beg, and no matter how much you want it to stop, it is not going to stop. Because once God decides that his judgment is coming, Old Testament or New, nobody's going to stop it from coming. It's coming. Now, we can say, well, You know, you crazy Christian people and all this blah, yah, yah about what's going to happen and all that. Well, it's already happened. It happened 800 years before Jesus was here. It happened right here. And God said it was going to happen before it happened, and then it happens. In fact, when you get into chapter 10, woe to those who enact evil statutes and to those who constantly record unjust decisions so as to deprive the needy of justice and rob the poor. Isn't that where we are in our world today? What happened in that day? Well, Assyria took them, just like God said it was in chapter 8. And not only put them in captivity, but was not very nice to them. So it's going to be interesting as we go forward to see all of this stuff play out, but you read it and you say, wow, this is amazing. And then we go about our business, living our life any way we want to, and then don't understand if God decides that he's going to punish us for what we do, what we choose, why we reject him. And many people say, oh, I ain't never rejected God. Really? You reject him in all the decisions you make every day. What are you talking about? You don't reject God. And if you don't start repenting about those rejections, well, then you may be the next one to be swallowed up in the waters of the Euphrates. Because that's a metaphor. That's a metaphor. Of course, you could get swallowed up in water. I mean, that could happen. But Isaiah has to go and tell the people, because you have chosen the world over God, and as much as these people have rejected the gentle flowing waters of Shiloh, as much as you have rejected your God, you now are going to deal with the swift, strong waters of the Euphrates. Now, therefore, behold, the Lord is about to bring on them. You see that? So what we see here is we see Isaiah's son showing us what the destruction is looking like. And if you go forward, because we can go forward because we know the history, if you go forward about 800 and 900 years, what you find is Jesus being assaulted, God in the flesh being assaulted on this earth. No different rejection except that he was here. It's just like what we talked about this morning in Deuteronomy. There's no way if you have an experience with God that you don't understand or know how great he is and how much glory he has. But if you fear it in the wrong way, in other words, if you fear it as a threat instead of fear it as an honor, well, then guess what's going to happen to you? You're going to reject it, right? And we know that even in the tribulation time, they're going to beg for the rocks to fall on them. And that's interesting because who are you going to beg? Who are you going to cry out to ask the rocks to fall on you? The God who is causing the tribulation? Because he's the only one that can make that happen. Isn't that interesting? We think, I don't like God, I reject God, I don't want a God, but oh, please, would you just let the rocks fall on me? Who are you talking to? If there is no God, then are you talking to the rocks? The rocks ain't talking back. So it's very interesting how we think in our mind. It's just like Israel. Israel knew how great a God they had, but in the convenience of life, Assyria, they were much better for them because now we have this flesh protector. It's not the spirit. We can see it. We can touch it. But guess what happens with that great ally? They go to war with them and they take them. God is the true ally. He doesn't come and take you. He comes and loves you. unless you have rejected him. And if you reject him, then guess what? He comes to judge you. And I don't think any of us are as ready for that as we think we are. So I found something that was very interesting. Let's see who this is that did this. Somewhere, where are you? Ivan Friesen divided chapter 8, 1 through 15 into 3 encounters. And I thought this was a very interesting thought. The first encounter, he says, begins with an instruction to write a message on a large tablet in a common character. Why write this message? I believe that he wanted this message written for the future. Not for now, but for future generations to come back and remember what happens when you choose this quick booty, this quick fix to things. What happens? I think it's still true in our world today, by the way, that when we choose the fast way, the quick way, the world way, however you want to say it, it never ends up in a very good place. Never. And it's like sin. You know, it always takes me further than I want to go, keeps me longer than I want to stay, and costs me more than I ever wanted to pay. That's kind of this whole scenario. That's why he didn't really explain it all that way, but I just stole his first encounter begins with the instruction to write a message on a large tablet. Why? So that future generations would understand what not to do. Don't do that. And also, just like in chapter 7, we use that hopefully to share the message, and not only to share the message, but to be confident in what God has promised us in the first place, right? And then the second encounter, he says, is this submerging flood, this analogy of a smooth-flowing water and then a strong and abundant water. And we know that it's a metaphor because we know what's going to happen. They're not going to get swallowed up in water. They're going to get swallowed up by people, right? But still, when you can see it in an analogy like a rolling river or a smooth river, well, then you can recognize what's going to happen. In fact, he says that it will sweep on into Judah, it will overflow and pass through, it will reach even to the neck, and the spread of its wings will fill the breadth of your land. Look, O Emmanuel. Now, wait a minute. Emmanuel means God with us. Why did he put that at the end of that? Is God still going to be with them even though all that's going to happen? He is. So he reminded them, even though you are going to drown basically in the things you've decided, God will still be with you. Isn't that encouraging? Be broken, O peoples, and be shattered, and give ear all remote places of the earth. Gird yourselves, but yet be shattered. What does that mean? Humble yourselves. Be broken and shattered in the ways of the world, and strengthen yourself in the ways of God. This almost would have been a fairly good Father's Day message, maybe. I don't know. We could have probably used it that way. But it's definitely a good message for the church to understand that we have to make right decisions according to what God says and not according to what the world says. Because when we make our decisions according to the world and we belong to God, we're still going to be in judgment. But, O Emmanuel, God with us, makes me feel good that he says, even while it is even to the neck, and it spreads its wings and it gets you all, I'll be with you. Don't y'all like that? I love that. And then the third thing he says is to admonish the fear of the Lord. When you look at verse 11, it says, "For so the Lord spoke to me with mighty power and instructed me not to walk in the way of this people, saying, you are not to say it is a conspiracy in regard to all that this people call a conspiracy, and you are not to fear what they fear or be in dread of it. It is the Lord of hosts whom you should regard as holy, and he shall be your fear, and he shall be your dread." So it makes good sense that the world would say, what conspiracy we have going on here. The world would say, people are acting crazy. But God says to Isaiah, Isaiah, don't you dare be like the people and call this a conspiracy. In fact, I believe what this says is that Israel says, see, God abandoned us. God made us a promise and then he abandoned us. But God didn't abandon them. They abandoned him, right? But he says, you don't regard this like these people do, and you don't call this a conspiracy. In fact, you call it what it is, judgment. And if you're going to fear, you fear me. If you're going to dread, you dread me. Because I'm the one who's going to bring Assyria to wipe you out. I am the one who's going to make all of this a stumbling block, a snare, a trap. Nobody that's human, me. So when we look at this and think about our own lives and how do we use this today and where we are, the truth is, if we choose to follow the world and we choose to do what the world does, don't you think that it's a snare and a trap and it's a stumbling block for us and we should be judged for it? I think we should. If nothing more than just being accountable for the decisions we make, understanding and knowing the truth of God, because we proclaim ourselves to be Christians. And that's one thing I think most people don't understand, is that when we proclaim out our mouth that we're Christians, we're held to a different standard than the world. And we can claim it's unfair and God doesn't have a right. But again, you're talking about the one who created all things. Do you really have an argument with him? I mean, you can try, I guess. But do you think you're going to win? Israel certainly didn't. And they thought they had it made, man. Think about this. They're going to the temple every day and they're doing all of their praying and all the yah, yah, yah. And yet they're consulting mediums and spirits. That's pretty scary. If you're consulting mediums and spirits in here today, you probably need to stop. That is demonic. That is evil. And whether you think it's fun or not, or funny or not, or cute or not, it's not. In fact, God says, why are you consulting them when all they talk to is the dead? And by the way, how do you ever know they're even talking to the dead? You probably fill out some form for them that tells them everything they need to know about who you've lost and all those things. And so they say, tell me a little bit about them. And then when they share what they said to you, well, you just told them what they needed to know. You know what's greater is when God tells you something nobody knows. Then you know it's from God, right? It's just as amazing to me to look at this chapter and realize that these are God's people. And they have gotten so far away from him that they don't even consult him anymore. They might pray, but they don't pray to him. They don't talk to him. Verse 18, Isaiah says, "Behold, I and the children whom the Lord has given me are for signs and wonders in Israel from the Lord of hosts who dwells on Mount Zion." Do you see that? He says, me and the children that God has given to me to walk this walk, we are signs and we are wonders. In other words, Isaiah says things to them nobody else knows but Isaiah. And the only reason Isaiah knows is because God has told him. Write this thing down. Why? Because in a few years, they're going to need to look back and see that what I said was true. And what I said happened. Thankfully, 2,900 years later, we're standing here today in Calvary Baptist Church reading what happened in 800 BC. And we know it happened because we have the history. And the history said they did take them. They did wipe them out. Who they didn't kill, they used as slaves. And of course, like always, we serve a great God, which we shared this morning. How do we know that? Because when they cried out and they repented, you know what God did? He redeemed them. And redeemed them. And redeemed them. And redeemed them. And you say, wow, they're lucky. You're just as lucky. Because the truth is, in our world today, we have to get redeemed every day because we have so many choices that we make, and there are so many bad choices that we make, that God keeps redeeming us and redeeming us and redeeming us. That doesn't mean consequences aren't coming. It doesn't mean the Euphrates ain't fixing to wipe you out. But what it does mean is even if it does, God's going to redeem you. God's going to forgive you. And God's going to pick you back up, and he's going to move you forward. So I thought these three encounters were pretty interesting. I like the way that this commentator set this thing up because it does fit them, but it also fits us. And we are thankful, I am thankful, that Isaiah wrote it down because we wouldn't have it today if he didn't write it down. And maybe sometimes there's things in our own lives that need to get written down, not only for us, but maybe generations to come past us. I don't know. But we definitely need to understand that when we are disobedient, the rough rivers are coming. The Euphrates is going to swallow us up. The good thing is, on the other side, it spits you out. So it's like the prodigal son in some ways, but not really. But even like the prodigal son, we make our mistakes, we make our choices, but God is always there to redeem us. Mahar Shala Hashbaz. Told you I was going to do it one more time. It's a very confusing thing because some people want to say he is Emmanuel in the moment. But I don't want you to get it twisted. He is not. He is not God with us. That only happens one time, and that was when Jesus came. But he is a representative to what's going to come and what's going to happen. And I do believe not only was this for when Jesus was born, but I also believe this is for when he comes back. And he is coming back. And maybe it'll be today. I don't know. I hope so. But look at what happens because they chose other gods besides the true God. Verse 20, to the law and to the testimony, if they do not speak according to this word, it is because they have no dawn. Do you understand that? It is because they have no future. They will pass through the land hard-pressed and famished, and it will turn out that when they are hungry, they will be enraged and curse their king and their God as they face upward. Then they will look to the earth and behold distress and darkness, the gloom of anguish, and they will be driven away into the darkness. If we fight, reject, deny what our God's called us to, this is what it's going to look like. And as Christians especially, if we know the light, we've accepted the light, and we go back into the darkness, it's going to be really dark. So you got to be very open to yourself, in my opinion, to where you are in your walk with God and where your faith is. What are you trusting? Who are you trusting? If you're trusting in the world more than you're trusting in God, you probably better get that changed if you proclaim Jesus Christ as your Lord, because I think hopefully when you leave here, you'll have this vision of the Euphrates gobbling you up, hopefully, because it will gobble you up. It's exactly what happened to Israel at this moment, is that they rejected God and they accepted the world, and God said, okay, if that's what you're going to do, well then the gentle flowing waters are over. Now the strong ones are coming. So in your life and in mine, individually, we can see this play out. But we also can see it play out in our church, right? If we're faithful to God, God will be faithful to us. If we're not faithful to God, well then the rough, strong, abundant waters of the Euphrates is coming for us. It's not just an individual thing, and it's not just a group thing. It is a thing. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He doesn't change. So if you say, well, thank goodness that was the Old Testament, and we're in the New, we can turn a few pages and that'll be a way. No, because God doesn't change. And unfortunately for us as humans, we have all that stupid human nature that we have, and we don't change much either, right? So I'm going to leave you with this in verse 10. Devise a plan, but it will be thwarted. State a proposal, but it will not stand, for God is with us. If God is with me, who can hurt me? If God is against me, who can help me? You see, Isaiah says, be broken if you're broken and you're shattered, and you give ear to God, then God will be with you. Aren't you glad that Emmanuel was born? Aren't you glad that he died, that he was buried, and that he rose again on the third day? Aren't you glad that you were able to speak with your mouth what you believed in your heart, and you could be saved? And no matter what the world plans, no matter what the world proposes, if God is with you, can't stand. Now, it may get you for a little while, but it can't stay. Isn't that exciting? Are y'all excited about that? Because you should be. Next, the birth and the reign of the Prince of Peace. Y'all know who that's going to be, right? Wow. Chapter 9 is an awesome chapter for sure. And then chapter 10, that's when all of the bad happens. How are y'all liking Isaiah? Pretty good? Good. Well, all right. Don't forget we have a business meeting. If you'll bow your heads, I'll dismiss us. Father God, I thank you, Lord, for